Hamid. We are Group 6 and today we'll be presenting based on the case study of Honeywell. I'm Irvina and I will start off by stating the differences of both the countries based on Hofstad culture dimension. Firstly, Malaysia takes the lead for being one of the countries with the highest score of 100 for power distance dimension where inequality is distributed among individuals in a society in many factors such as status, wealth, and authority that very often occurs in leader-follower relationship. Malaysian culture is very attentive and thoughtful of the system of titled individuals and untitled individuals. They allow and give power to people who are at the top of the organization. On the other hand, United States scores 40 on this dimension. In the American work environment, they are not dependent on the hierarchy system but more concerned in creating equality among individuals. They also encourage horizontal communication rather than a top-down approach where employees are given the opportunities to initiate things, improve and resolve problems. Moving on to the dimension of individualism versus collectivism, here it shows that the United States have a higher individualism than Malaysia. Malaysia scored a 26 in this dimension as it is a collectivist society that focuses more on we rather than I. Malaysians are mostly interactive and they work as a group. Their mindset is more directed towards achieving something in a group rather than personal achievements. United States scores 91 in individualism because Americans care more about their personal achievement rather than as collectives. They often ask the question of how does it benefit me instead of having a mutual belief within a group. Lastly, in the long-term orientation dimension, where Malaysians score a 41 while United States score 26. Malaysia is known to follow virtues that are future-oriented like planning, investing, and saving for the future. They are expected to interact with others in the long run and their personal, social, and business relationships are maintained and reinforced through continuous and long-term association. In contrast, United States prefer fostering virtues of the past and present, such as maintaining time honored traditions and norms. American business mostly measure their performance on a short term basis, which helps drive the individual to strive for quicker results within the workplace. Next, I will pass on to Zihao to continue.
Now I will continue with difference in industrial relations and employment relations of United States and Malaysia. First of all, the first industrial relations of United States is their employees are being governed by National Labor Relations Act 1935 to protect the labor in terms of wages, working hours, and other subjects. Not only that, for the employers, that was protected by a union will get a higher chance to have a higher salary compared to those that didn't protect by the union. This is because the union employees tend to have more working experience uh, under the employee as a union member. And the example of traditional work, such as real work and mining, are currently in U.S. country. However, the industrial and employment relations have influenced the employer in two ways where they need to follow the direct regulations and term of conditions when employing. Not only that, they must also maintain the regulations of which organized labor and management are related to each other. Next, for Malaysia's country employees are protected by Industrial Relations Act 1967, which is also called IRA, that provide bargaining right for the employees. This helps to maintain the relationship between the employers and the employees to get a fair decisions when in the workplace. Therefore, this act also protects the employees to avoid being dismissed by the employers without a valid and reasonable reason. In Malaysia, employees are normally represented by unions such as Malaysia Trade Union (MTUC) and the Congress of Union of Employees in the Public and Civil Service (QPEC). However, employers are also being represented by unions such as MEF Malaysia Employers Federations. The example of work in industrial relations and employment relations in Malaysia are work such as health, education, and transportation. Now I pass to Luis to continue the slide.
Okay, so for my part, I will be explaining the local law in Malaysia and United States. So in Malaysia, under the Minimum Wages Order of 2016, the minimum wage is set at RM 1000 in Peninsular Malaysia and RM 920 in East Malaysia and Labuan, whereas in US, the Fair Labor Standard Act of 1938 determines the minimum wage, which is currently set at $7.25. Moving on in Malaysia, overtime rates of 1.5 hourly rate of pay applies, and in the US, it is also an overtime rate of 1.5 hourly rate of pay, but it only applies to employees that work over 40 hours a week. Next, in Malaysia, females are entitled to 60 days of paid maternity leave, and in the US, the Family Medical and Family Leave Act of 1993 provides employees with up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave and certain medical conditions. However, for females with maternity leave, the company will normally decide how long they are able to take off when they are pregnant. Moving on, in Malaysia, annual leave of 8 days, sick leave of 14 days for employees that have less than 2 years working experience, and in the US, an employee that has 1 year of working experience is entitled to 11 days of paid vacation leave. Besides that, in Malaysia, EPF, SOSCO, and monthly income tax deductions applies, whereas in the US, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974 oversees employees and employers' pension plans. Finally, in Malaysia, the Personal Data Protection Act of 2010 ensures employers must notify their employees of the privacy policy in an organization, and in the US, the Americans with Disabilities Act 1990 makes it illegal for employers to discriminate against job applicants based on their disability. Moving on into the next slide, we have common practices in Malaysia and United States in an organization. So in Malaysia, showing up late to meetings is considered normal. This is because people are often stuck in bad traffic jams, so it is somewhat acceptable to be late. Whereas in the US, punctuality is crucial, and if you are late, it will reflect poorly on you. Moving on, in Malaysia, employees are accustomed to 9-hour work days with a 1 hour lunch break for 5 days a week. And in the US, the average full time worker works about 47 hours a week, which puts it almost similar to Malaysians' working hours in a week. Moving on, in Malaysia, there is an inability to leave the workplace on time. This is because most of them have high workloads and their bosses do not like it if they leave the office before them. However, in the US, Americans tend to eat at their desk while they continue to work. So as you can see, they're trying to kill two birds with one stone because they're so busy and have a lot of work, so they don't mind sitting at their desk while eating to continue finishing their work. Besides that, in Malaysia, employees are given unrealistic key performance index. So this can apply to an employee that works in sales because they are pushed to land more clients every day. Whereas in the US, employees are offered around 2 weeks of paid leave, but only 50% of them do not take it, which shows that most of them have a high workload as well. Finally, in Malaysia, employees are expected to reply emails and messages regarding their work even after working hours. And in the US, it is similar because Americans also tend to send and answer emails after their work hours have ended. Moving on to the cultural system, which is Ashwin's part.
So I'll be explaining on the difference between Malaysia and the America in terms of the cultural system. So Malaysians, they are more to social interaction, but whereas senior employer will look after their new junior employees during the work hours and also during the leisure time, and they'll join together for meeting over the weekends, having lunch together, plan for weekend activities. The perceptions of family takes place. Next, Malaysians are religious. For example, Muslim employees are religious and it is compulsory for Muslims to attend their Friday prayers, and employers should not have meeting during their praying hours, for example, during Maghrib, which is their evening prayers. And the next is structure and hierarchy plays an important role in the MNC company in Malaysia, where they follow hierarchy structure. And employees, they have to follow their superiors' instruction and also follow in their decision making, and they have to address a person based on their titles and job descriptions. For example, Dato, Datin, Dr., Madam, and Mr. The next is attitude towards punctuality and business practices. Malaysians are known to have a relaxed attitude towards time, and in order to do business, Malaysians have to be able to speak in English as it is the universal language, and Bahasa Melayu as the mother tongue of Malaysia due to interacting with the government agencies in Malaysia. Next, Americans are more towards task orientation. For example, they are hardworking and achievement oriented, focused on profit. And Americans are not so religious because they are believed to be a secular nations. which does not believe in religious or spiritual matters, and they believe that hard work, commitment, and good management enables global work culture. And hierarchy does not play an important role in America. They believe it is an individual culture and they have rights to give opinion regardless of their age and position in the company. And they greet each other in an informal way and they greet with their initial name. An attitude towards time and business. Americans are believed to be punctual and they value the time, and a handshake is the most common greeting when meeting someone for the first time in a professional setting. And employees should not be offended, and they are not offended if disagreement is shown bluntly. When ideas are rejected, it does not necessarily reflect poorly on the person who proposed them. Next, I would like to pass to Lawrence.
Hello, for my part, I'll be talking about the similarities in recruitment and selection of Malaysia and USA. So for the first part, interview, Malaysia and USA both practice the face-to-face interview as part of the recruitment and selection process as a method to see the ability of the interviewee. Secondly, screen applicants screen through every applicant's background before selecting by filtering out the needed requirement for the job. Thirdly, reference check. Check on referrals to ensure the performance according to previous employer to ensure the ability of the interviewee. For the fourth point, discrimination policy. There are explicit laws that does not allow discrimination during the process. For example, women have experienced sex discrimination or discrimination due to maternity or pregnancy as employer may not want to hire candidates. For the second slide, differences in recruitment and selection of Malaysia and United States. For the United States, USA has a practice of having verbal contracts such as a simple meetup in a random place, and an offer happens, they will shake hands and call it a deal. Whereas in Malaysia, it is still heavily dependent on contracts, standard contracts, where only a signature on the document ensures the deal is sealed. USA often follows the social process of hiring based on social references and following the process of Facebook and LinkedIn projects. Malaysia is still based on basic system of hiring without focusing too much on social process of hiring. Lastly, candidates are all equal with no special treatment throughout the process, whereas issues such as giving a favor in order to secure a job is illegal. Whereas Asia countries may follow their culture's characteristics, such as favoring certain skin colors or religion to hire. For the second slide, I will pass it to my teammate Louis for the recommendation.
Okay, so moving on to the recommendations. These are recommendations on how Honeywell can attract the best talent to work for them. So the first action would be extra incentives. So this can be cash and non-cash payment, which also includes bonuses, sales commissions, health benefits, and overtime wages. Moving on to employment law, if Honeywell were to hire an employee in Malaysia, they'd have to be aware of the employment law that applies, which includes things such as overtime rates of 1.5 hourly rate of pay, and the female's entitlement to 60 days of paid maternity leave has to be considered. To skills and qualifications, so if Honeywell wants to hire an engineer, well, they can look at hiring them from Taylor's University graduates that provide programs such as the CDIO initiative and GCSP for engineering qualifications, which meets the world's demand and is the first in Southeast Asia. If Honeywell looks to hire marketing employees, well, they can look to Sunway University with programs such as the marketing program CIM, which produces successful professional marketer skills. Moving on to hiring benefits. So if Honeywell wishes to send an employee to Malaysia from their parent company in the US, they can provide attractive relocation benefits, which is suitable international compensation package that benefits meet their personal needs, such as housing and insurance. Besides that, administrative incentives that assist foreign workers with immigration process, work visas, and domestic documentations. This will make it more appealing for them to come and work here. Finally, we have positive work environment and diversity. So Honeywell can develop policies to accommodate a diverse workforce that addresses harassment issues and strives for equal opportunities in the workplace. This will be how they can attract the best talent to work for their company. Moving on to the conclusion is Ashwin.
So it is important to understand the culture of each country. This is because when people interact with different people from different countries, they tend to know more about their culture, and this can prevent racial and ethics problem and reduce stereotype. It is also important for employment law in countries because it protects employees from being harmed by employers and prevent workers from being vulnerable from their threats. That's all from Group 6. Thank you.
Thank you.